welcome to this Facebook live stream. And I'd like to introduce you to the man I am interviewing this morning. His name is Lindsay Adams. And Lindsay Adams, OAM, is a practiced speaking professional, seminar facilitator, and relationship marketing specialist. With over 20 years' experience, Lindsay's focus is on building effective relationships and generating more sales in less time by doing business by relationship. Lindsay is a Global Speakers Federation past president, a CSP Global Speaking Fellow, NLP practitioner, and has been awarded the OAM Order of... Tell us what that is and why it's such a big deal, Lindsay.
Hello, Paul, and it's a pleasure to be here. And the OAM stands for Order of Australia Medal. And I am just so thrilled to be able to tell you that on Australia Day 2020, that's the 26th of January, which is a big deal in our country, they have the Australia Day Awards.
Yeah.
And I was given a medal in the Order of Australia, OAM, for my services to the professional speaking industry. This is, it's a bit of a big deal in our country. It's the fourth highest civil honour that anyone can be granted. So I'm humbled and honoured to be recognised in this way. That was a great day, a wonderful experience in my life.
And that was how long ago you achieved this award?
January 2020. And interestingly, Paul, because of COVID, normally they would hold a function at the governor's office, government house, and the governor would hand out 300 medals in one ceremony. But because of COVID, we had an individual ceremony. So my wife, my kids, and the guy who nominated me met with the governor and his wife and his attaché for 10 minutes. And he pinned the medal on my chest, and we had a conversation. And it was a magic experience. It was a once in a lifetime, such a memorable, happy moment for me. And then we went outside and we had our own little cocktail party and high tea around a table in his garden. It was just a really wonderful experience.
How wonderful to be recognized in this way. So let's get to it, Lindsay. I've heard you speak at conferences before all over the world, and you often talk about people having habits, rituals, routines. Why is this important, and how does this affect them for good and for bad?
Yeah, well, good question, Paul. We all as human beings have habits that we follow day by day. And some of these habits we're aware of and some of them we're not aware of. And so think for a moment, for those who are listening or watching, when they go to work in the morning, do they jump in the car and drive on the same route pretty much every day? It's a very common thing. And then when they get to their destination, they park in almost the same place every day. Yeah. And so it's a habit. And then interestingly, what happens sometimes, we get in the car and we drive to work or our destination, and then we wake up. It's almost like we're in a trance for the journey. Yeah. I used to have an office 10 minutes away from home. So on Saturday morning, I'm not working, right? I'm taking my wife to the shops. We're going shopping. We get in the car, we're driving, and she says, "Where are you going?" I was driving to the office. Yeah. So I got in the car and off I went. It was a habit because, there's only one way in and out of our suburb, and I was heading out and it was morning. So clearly I was going to work. Yeah. Now, Paul, you don't do this, but I do. I shave every morning. And for your listeners, when you shave, gents, do you have a pattern? And Paul, remember back to those days when you used to shave before COVID. I know you used to shave. Yeah. You'd have a pattern. You start somewhere on your face and you finish somewhere else. Yeah. And you do it the same way every day. And ladies who are listening, when they put their makeup on, it's the same thing. They have a pattern. And we use these patterns over and over because it's easy, because it makes life convenient, but then those patterns become ingrained in our behaviour. And we have patterns to buy things. We have patterns to sell things. We have patterns in terms of how we eat our food, how we prepare our food. We have patterns for everything. Now, as a relationship management specialist, helping people understand their patterns helps them get on better with other people, because we all like to decide and do things in a certain way.
Yeah.
And if we can understand your decision-making pattern, it would enable me to work better with you, for example. So if you and I worked in a team, now, you and I have known each other for a long time, and so we're aware of the way we do things.
Sure.
And so we make allowances for the other person because that's just Paul, that's just Lindsay. But think about it for those who are listening. Think about the person that you don't get on with the most at work. What is it about them that annoys you? I'll betcha their pattern, their decision-making pattern, their work execution pattern, their pattern for doing something or other is different to yours, and that just bugs the hell out of you.
So would that be the process that they make, the time that they take, the delay in the amount of information they want? Is it those kinds of things that differ from person to
Yes.
person?
Yeah, so there are 4 different behavioural styles, and I do a lot of work with the DISC profile. Now, a lot of your listeners may be familiar with DISC. It's been around for a long time. It is the most popular online behavioural assessment tool, and there are 4 different quadrants in DISC: DISC, dominant, influencer, steady, conscientious. So D's and I's act quickly. They think quickly. They act fast. S's and C's are more measured in their pace. They're a little slower. They think slower. They act slower. They even speak slower.
Yeah.
Now, D's and C's are more task focused. So they like to focus on the task, whereas I's and S's focus on people.
Yeah.
And so again, once we understand the differences in the behaviors, it will dictate how people operate. So an I in an office situation, very outgoing, the world loves the world of ideas and excitement, gets excited, big picture, whereas the complete opposite is the C, the conscientious, who loves to check things off carefully, wants to think before they decide. They need time to process, and they will do their thinking.
You can't rush
So
them.
you can't rush them. No,
What
not
happens
at
when
all.
You do rush them.
Well, and that's why we have these conflicts at work, because if we do rush them, they dig their toes in and they won't decide. They'll say, "I can't decide now. I need to think about this."
Yeah.
And by the way, you are a nuisance, and you should come back later when I've got time to deal with you.
Okay.
This is these are simple workplace conflicts that happen. And, as a leader in an organization, if you can understand the different behavioral styles of the people in your team, you can deal with them each in a slightly different way, and they will go with you on the journey. Whereas if you try to lead in your one standard format, you're going to ride roughshod over someone in your team.
So you're saying that once you understand the behavioral style, you can actually get them to do almost anything that you want by persuasion?
Yes. Yes, and look, it's really simple how to figure this out. So the first thing to think about is, do they speak fast? Do they act fast? Or do they speak slower and do they act slower? Okay, so, based on that, they're going to be probably an S or a C if they're slow-paced, or a D or an I if they're fast-paced. Now, the next thing is, are they task-focused or people-focused? If they're task-focused, they're going to be a D or a C. If they're people-focused, they're going to be an S or an I. And so you can very quickly figure out where they fit just on those simple parameters. The speed at which they operate, and are they people-focused or task-focused? And so, it ain't rocket science, but it is a science. And part of it is observation. So we have to keep our antenna up. We've got to be listening, thinking, tuning into the other person so that we can tune into their behavioral preference.
Okay, so if I'm a leader or a salesperson, so as a leader, I might be leading a team. As a salesperson or even a sales manager, I might be managing a team, but as a salesperson, I'm trying to persuade people.
Yes.
Are you saying that I need to be adapting my style according to the individual person that I'm dealing with at the time?
Only if you want to make a sale, or only if you want your team to follow you where you want them to go.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you're happy for them to say no, If you're happy for them to say no, then you don't adapt your style. But if you want them to
Correct.
say yes, then you need to do some adapting. But that adaptation is temporary, isn't it?
Oh yeah. And you've got to be like the chameleon and adjust your style depending on who you're talking to. And so let's just work on the sales aspect here for a minute, because I know a lot of your listeners and followers are business people, and that makes them automatically salespeople, because particularly self-employed, they often have to sell a product or a service. So here's the thing: the dominant, they make up about 10% of the population. They love to buy. They love to be sold to, and you can use all of your overcoming objection strategies with them, and they won't be offended. The rest, the I, the S, and the C, hate hard pressure salespeople. They're happy to buy when they're ready, but they do not like to be sold to. And so if you want to make a sale, then you have to adjust to, to 3/4 of the population who don't like to be sold to. If you're a high D, a dominant, they like to decide and do. Get on with it. Make it happen. Yeah. And they're just as happy to be, as I said, have the high pressure stuff, but the rest have their own buying preference, and we've got to adjust. So with the I, we get them excited. Wow, Paul, if you buy this widget from me, it's going to make you look 10 times more handsome than you already are. The girls will swoon over you. Yes, I can see you're excited already. And, you're going to get them. Yeah, serious. If only it was true. But you're going to get them excited, and they'll come on board quickly. Now, the S's and the C's are a little slower, and you've got to give them more features and benefits. Yeah. And particularly with the C's, you've got to give them lots of detail, and they will never decide on the first engagement. So if you're a salesperson engaging with a high C, you've got to give them lots of information. Give them a brochure. You might have to do a written proposal. And then in a couple of days' time, follow up with them and say, have you had time to think about it? Do you have any questions? Not, are you ready to buy now? Do you have any questions? And they will have questions. And then only after those questions are answered, and you may need to even give them something else in writing, give them more information, then they might decide to purchase from you. But if you try to rush them, they will not buy. They'll dig their toes in until they're ready.
So what you're actually
and so it's
sorry, Lindsay, what you're actually doing is that you're adapting your style in order to be more personable to them and get them to trust you, to enable them to make a decision that is going to be perceived as being in their own best interests.
So you've heard the phrase, I'm sure, know, like, and trust. Until someone knows you and likes you and trusts you, they won't purchase from you. And that is the high C's Bible. They want to know you and like you and trust you, and until that happens, they will never buy a sausage from you. Nothing. And so it's critical that we go through those steps, particularly with the S's and the C's. Yeah. D's and I's, slightly different. They want to get caught up in the idea or the concept. They love something that's new and exciting, and they love the world of change, and they like to be trendsetters. So they'll jump on board. They're the early adopters. But the S's and C's they're kind of the long tail. They'll come in late in the piece, and after everybody else has already been doing it for 6 months, they'll come on board and go, well, if the rest of the world are doing it, maybe I should too. Yeah. So they're a bit slower to adopt.
But now, as I understand the DISC profile, you're not just either this or that. You are a certain percentage on each axis.
Yeah. So I'm a high I, but I'm also an S. So I'm an I-S combination. Yeah. Now, can I do D? Can I do C? Yes, I can. Yeah. And we can all have the ability to step into the other quadrants when we need to. Yeah. So about 10 years ago, I bought a franchise business. The franchise contract was 34 pages. I read that contract 7 times. Intense examination, because I was, spending a chunk of money to purchase a business, and I wanted to make sure that I was making a good investment. Now, can I do that day in, day out? No. But can I do it when I need to? Yes, I can. but in short bursts only. Now, some people are what, if we go with the cricket analogy, you understand the term all-rounder. You know, they can bat, they can bowl, they can catch, they can keep, they can field. Some people are good at, they can step between the four quadrants very easily and with great skill.
That's
Others tend to love.
That's versatility.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Now, others tend to have one major preference, and then they might move a little to one side or the other. And that's probably the bulk of people tend to have one major behavioural style, and they move a little to one side or the other.
So is it an advantage to be more versatile? Or not necessarily say?
I think, yes, that would help if you're a salesperson.
Yeah.
But I think the advantage is to be knowledgeable and understand your style versus the style of the person that you're speaking with. Because if you can understand where they fit, then you can, you can dance with them. And that's the key, really. It's the understanding, having the knowledge and then applying the knowledge.
So one of the things that we've often advocated is that if you come up against a customer who you know has a need, but you're not getting through to them, what is the value of choosing one of your colleagues that has got a different style to yourself and bringing them along, let them do most of the talking and help them with that particular customer in order to create that trust bond? How would that work?
Yeah. I think that's a great idea, provided your colleague, of course, has the same behavioural style so that they can get on with the other person in the appropriate way. That's a great strategy. Yeah, by all means.
Okay. So I can see this being very useful for consultants, trainers, speakers, but can other people use this material? I mean, as a father or a mother, how would this help you in your life to be better and more effective?
So I want to ask you a question, Paul. I know you're married. I know you've been married for a long time. When you come home, when your wife comes into the house in the afternoon after you've been apart for many hours, can you tell whether she's happy or sad?
Or preoccupied? Yeah, I pretty much can.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I've got to look up and make an effort. I've got to connect with her to pick that up. Sometimes people just walk in, they walk past one another because they've got something else on their minds, like getting to the loo quickly. But yeah, if you hone in on the person, yes, you can pick it up.
So think about this then, a rhetorical question to those who are watching or listening.
Yeah.
Think about your significant other and you see them at the end of the day. Can you tell whether they've had a good day or not by looking at them? Yes, generally people can.
Yeah.
And why is that so? It's because they've spent years of analysing the facial expressions of their loved one. They know when they're happy. They know when they're sad. They know when, what's that little pensive look they've got, or whatever it is. And they've built up a database of knowledge, and they know by that look, I better behave myself here, trouble brewing. Or they know by that look, happy days, time to get out the wine, we're going to celebrate. Now, think about this. If we could transfer that same skill to business and simply by observing others detect their mood or their buying pattern, wouldn't that make a difference in the way we deal with people?
Yeah.
And so we can, again, if you work with someone for long enough, you build up a database of the look. I know people who've worked together for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and they know each other very well. But we don't often have that luxury. And so when you meet someone for the first time, it's important that we listen carefully and we start to pick up clues as to where they might fit. So how fast do they speak? How extroverted are they? How many questions do they ask in the conversation?
Yeah.
So if they speak fast, if they talk out loud, if they wave their arms around a bit, then they may well be a D or an I.
Sure.
Because remember, they speak fast. But if they speak slow and they ask lots of questions, well, then they're probably more detail focused, so they're S or a C. So can you see where I'm going with this? We've just got to listen and tune in.
Yeah. So what I'm seeing is that as the salesperson or the manager, you're armed with having done the disc profile on yourself. You know what your style is. You know whether you're a high D or a high S or whatever the case may be. But obviously, you can't walk into somebody's office and say to them, look, can I quickly do a disc profile on you? You don't have time. So you're going to have to use a different methodology. You're going to have to pick up what we would refer to as the telltale signs. Would that be what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, that's
Now,
really interesting. So that requires some skill.
yeah, it does. And every learned behavior requires some skill and application, and it's simply a learned behavior. And so, particularly if you're in sales or leadership and you want to get on board with your people or your prospects, then you've got to tune into them and you've got to be observant. So you've got to listen carefully. You've got to watch them. Now, there are some other cues, Paul. The way people shake hands gives away their behavioural style. So the high D has a firm grip, and usually the handshake is one pump. So it's like, I'm going to try and demonstrate this. It's a bit hard, but it's like one pump. The high I, their handshake is a double pump. And so they're going to grip your hand, but it's going to go up and down a couple of times. The S's, they tend to they'll grip your hand and then they'll put another hand over the top of the handshake. So there'll be actually three hands involved. Yeah. So two from one person. And one of our old prime ministers, Kevin Rudd, was very famous for doing the two-handed handshake. He would greet world leaders and grab their hand, and then he put his left hand over the top. And some describe that as a power move to demonstrate that I'm on top, but it's really about his relationship. Now the C, they don't like to handshake that much, so they like their personal space, and so they will give a handshake, but it will be fleeting. So it'll be a very quick grasp, and they'll get space between you and them. And not just because of COVID, but because they don't want to get too close to you. So handshake's the first thing. Next thing you can look for is clothing. High Ds are well dressed. Men will wear a suit, ladies wear a suit. Men will have a big chunky watch on their wrist. Ladies will have lots of jewelry, rings, bracelets, necklaces, and so on. Big flashy earrings even. So the men will have highly polished shoes, so they'll look very well presented. Eyes, they'll have brighter clothing. They love clothes. They love colour. So they'll often have bright, outrageous shirts, interesting shoes, interesting glasses, interesting coloured hair. If only I had hair, Paul, I could demonstrate that.
Well, I was thinking S's about that when you were telling me about the shaving. I was wondering if you had to shave all the way around.
I used to.
You used to. You were saying about the S's.
S's tend to wear more pastel shades, so they're more muted in their colour. And C's don't like to shop, so they'll have worn or dated clothing. So some really simple cues you can look for there. And even if they're wearing a corporate uniform, the C's uniform will be the faded one. Because, well, I've had this shirt for 20 years and it still fits me. Why would I change it? Yeah. Whereas the D would go, oh, my goodness, this shirt's fading. I need a new one. And the I, of course, would be the same. They have a lot of pride in their clothing. If you get a chance to see their car, the Ds will have a big V8 muscle car. It'll go vroom, vroom, a big throaty exhaust. The Is will have a convertible with flashy wheels. The S's will have a very standard family vehicle. Now, I won't try and name models and brands because you're in a totally different country to me and they do vary. The C's will have either a hybrid car or a model which is 10 years old, because why would I need to update this car? It still runs fine. It gets me from A to B. This car works fine. I don't need a new one. This one works fine for me. And so if you get the luxury of seeing their cars, it gives it away again. Yeah, so there's lots of little cues.
Telltale signs, really, that you can pick up depending on where you are, how you meet them, and so on and so forth. So just to repeat for people that have tuned in fairly late, so the D stands for dominance, the I stands for influence, the S stands for steadiness, and the C for
Yes.
conscientious. Okay.
Yes, correct.
So,
And so there are colours. There are colours that go with that too, and that's red, yellow, green, and blue. And so, and it doesn't matter really. Some people relate more to the colours. Red make it happen. Yellow, joy. Green, more conservative, and blue, even more conservative.
yeah.
So there's lots of different ways you can go with it.
Okay, so now let's talk about the certain skills that the certain quadrants display. For instance, when it comes to the skill of reciprocity, which you and I both know is a very strong skill in terms of persuasion, which of the four would be better at just naturally doing reciprocity than the other? Or is that a
Well,
difficult one to answer?
that's a really interesting question. I don't know that I pondered that before, but I'm going to go with this. D's like to decide and do.
Yeah,
So they'll quite often attend a meeting, and if it's a prospecting meeting or a sales meeting, they'll say to their client or prospect, "I'll send you a proposal, and I'll send you, the information that you need." And so they would immediately they'd go straight back to their office, or maybe even do it in their car. They would type out an email,
yeah,
and they would send it off. But if they're a smart D, they would send something that was unexpected with that as well. And so that would be where the reciprocity comes in. So they, you know as well as I do, the law of reciprocity works like this: I help you, and you help me in response. I give you something, you give me something in response. The I's would be very good at the law of reciprocity because they're very giving and generous people, and they're very people oriented.
yeah.
D's are more task focused, so maybe less concerned with sending a gift to make a person feel good, but they would respond quickly.
Yeah.
So the I's would most likely send some nice gift or a book or a something or other. S's are very people oriented, and I often describe them as the aunts or uncles in the team. They're the people that others in the team go to, and they say, "Paul, do you know what that Lindsay just said to me? Blah, blah, blah." And Paul will go, there, it's all right. He didn't really mean it that way. He was just focused on getting the job done. And so they kind of soothe the frayed nerves of the other people. And so they're the sounding board. So in terms of relationship, they would be very good at reciprocity, but it would be more of a relationship-based reciprocity. It'd be helping them understand other people.
Sure.
Now, the C's, these are the detail people. So they, remember, they love lists. They're the people who come into work in the morning, they make a to-do list. And when they leave the office at night, it's tick, 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 done, done, done. Now, if they were taught that if you're a salesperson, you go into a sales meeting, you should send a gift after the meeting, then it would be part of their process. They would have a list, and the checklist would say, send proposal, clarify costing, send gift. And it would be tick, tick, tick. So each of the styles have the ability to generate or do business using the law of reciprocity, but each of them would do it in a different way.
Okay. So I want to ask you now about likability. I would instantly imagine that the person with a high I would find it quite easy to come across as likable, and that maybe your person with a high C would have to work on it. Would that make sense?
Well, you think of it this way. D's and I's are more extroverted. So in an office environment, they'll come into the office in the morning and they'll say, "G'day, Paul. G'day, Mary. G'day, Sue. G'day, Bob. Oh, how are you, Lindsay?" And, they'll walk through the office and calling out names because they know everybody's name and they know this much about everybody. The S's and the C's would come in and they may acknowledge the people who sit closest to them. "Morning, Paul. Morning, Mary. How are you today? Can I get you a coffee?" And their relationships are like this. They're very deep, but their friendship base is much narrower.
Gotcha.
And so they may know the names of everybody in the office, but they are never going to call them out when they come in. And I remember I worked with one guy in the tax office once upon a time, way back in my public sector career. He would come into work. He would say nothing to nobody and sit at his desk and begin work. And he was confronted by one day by one of my work colleagues, and he said, "Look, don't you like us?" He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you never acknowledge us when you come in the morning. You never say hello. We never get anything from you." And he went, "Oh," he was horrified that he had offended the other people. He was a high C, very introverted, and just had no idea that of the social mores that it was expected that he would acknowledge his work colleagues.
So one of the things
So,
that you're really saying to me is that it's quite a good idea to get some feedback from a colleague that you trust about how you are coming across.
yes. Now, we all have blind spots. I'm sure you're aware of a thing called the Johari window.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, four quadrants, and one of them is your blind spot. That's the things that you know about yourself, the things that others know about you, the things that you and others know about yourself, and then the things that you don't know. It's a blind spot.
Yeah.
And so we all have blind spots. Now, I think I'm incredibly handsome, but
Yes.
for others, that's a blind spot that I have.
Yes.
No need to agree so readily, Paul.
No, well, I'm listening and I'm acknowledging. I was taught that that's the way to be likable, is to acknowledge someone when speaking to you.
And so, but we all have these blind spots. Seriously, there are things that we don't know about ourselves that upset or offend other people. We have to be careful about that.
Okay. So if people were interested in finding out more about the tool, how do they get hold of you, and how would you be able to assist them?
Okay, so I do a lot of work with teams and leaders, helping them understand each other, work better together, and then I work with sales teams, helping them create more sales. The simplest way to get in touch with me is you can jump to my email. It's complicated. Listen carefully. It's Lindsay@lindsayadams.com.
Lindsay
You can go to my
lindsayadams.com.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
You can go to my website, lindsayadams.com.
That's even more complicated.
Yeah, or you can go on LinkedIn and search for Lindsay Adams. You can go on Facebook and search for Lindsay Adams. So I'm easy to find, and I would love to support your listeners if I could in some way. And I can do that either remotely or face to face. The modern world that we live in, there are no barriers anymore, Paul, which is incredible.
Well, you're absolutely right. But if they want to sit down and have a cup of coffee with you at these times, they're going to need to come to Brisbane, Queensland, Australia.
Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, where the weather is just magic. It's winter here and it was 21 degrees Celsius today. Can't complain about that.
Oh, you make me jealous. Lindsay Adams, this has been absolutely fascinating. How to get people to say yes when normally they would say no. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. And until next time.
Paul, thank you so much for the privilege.